Christmas at my mom's. You're not welcome. 13 words that ended my daughter-in-law's world forever. My name is Stevie O'Connor, and for 5 years, Zoe treated me like human garbage. She seated me with 8-year-olds at Thanksgiving dinner, called me genetic dead weight in front of 15 family members on Christmas Eve, humiliated me at grocery stores for using food stamps, told my grandchildren their grandfather was embarrassing trailer trash. But Zoe made one fatal mistake. She assumed the broken-down factory worker in thrift store clothes was exactly who I appeared to be. She never asked why I chose to live in a $750 apartment, never wondered why I drove a 15-year-old car, never questioned why I accepted her abuse with quiet dignity. When that Christmas text arrived, I stopped pretending. I booked a one-way flight to the Netherlands and claimed my 26 million euros inheritance. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from, because you're about to witness the most expensive family lesson ever taught. This is how I transformed from embarrassing grandfather to international headlines in 72 hours. To understand what happened, you need to know how my daughter-in-law Zoe treated me. I raised my son Patrick alone after his mother Anna died in a car accident 32 years ago. He was 3 years old. I worked double shifts at the General Motors plant in Lordstown, Ohio, making sure he had everything he needed. We weren't rich, but we had each other. Patrick grew up to be a good man, got himself a college degree, landed a job at First National Bank making $135,000 a year. Then he married Zoe. Zoe Pierce came from Westchester County money. Her father owned 3 car dealerships. She graduated from Columbia, drove a $68,000 BMW, and made it crystal clear from day one that I wasn't good enough for her family. But I didn't understand how deep her contempt ran until Thanksgiving 2023. I arrived at their house with a $20 pumpkin pie from Kroger. Nothing fancy, but it was what I could afford on my Social Security. Zoe took one look at the store-bought pie and said, "Oh, Eddie, we have professional catering this year." Then came the seating arrangement. "Eddie," she announced to the whole family, "we've saved you a special spot." She pointed to the kids' table. With my 8-year-old granddaughter, Emma, and 6-year-old grandson, Luke, I looked around. There were 15 adults at the main table. Zoe's parents, her brother's family, Patrick's colleagues, everyone staring. "I think there's been a mistake," I said quietly. Zoe smiled that sharp smile of hers. "No mistake. The children love their grandfather. Don't you, Emma?" My granddaughter looked embarrassed. She knew something was wrong. I sat at that kid's table for 3 hours. Ate my turkey while listening to adult conversation I wasn't invited to join. But that wasn't the worst part. As I was leaving, I overheard Zoe talking to her mother in the kitchen. I was putting on my coat by the front door when I heard her voice carrying through the house. "Thank God that's over," Zoe said. "I told Patrick we need to set boundaries. The children are starting to ask questions about why Grandpa dresses like he shops at Goodwill." Her mother laughed. "Well, doesn't he?" "It's embarrassing," Zoe continued. "My friends think we're poor. I had to explain that he's Patrick's father, not mine. I can't be responsible for his genetics. My genetics." I recorded that conversation on my phone. Still have it. 3 months later came Emma's 8th birthday party. Zoe invited 12 families from Emma's private school. $37,000 a year tuition. I showed up with a gift, a $40 art set from Target, wrapped it myself. When the other parents asked who I was, Zoe introduced me as Patrick's father. No name, no relationship to the children, just Patrick's father. One woman asked, "Oh, are you retiring soon?" Before I could answer, Zoe jumped in. "Eddie's already retired, from the auto plant." The way she said auto plant, like it was contagious. Later, I heard her telling another mother, "We're trying to teach the children about different backgrounds. You know, how service workers contribute to." Service workers. I'd spent 50 years building cars that these people drove, put my son through college on those wages. But to Zoe, I was just the help. That night, Patrick called me. "Dad, Zoe feels like you don't really fit in with our social circle. Our social circle. She thinks it might be better if you visit when it's just family time, no big events." I kept quiet. What could I say? That his wife saw me as a stain on her reputation? But I was taking notes. Mental notes. Something my mother told me on her deathbed kept echoing in my mind. "Promise me you'll live simply. but remember who you are. I was starting to remember. By December 2024, the pressure was crushing me from all directions. My landlord at Riverside Gardens Apartments sent notice that my rent was jumping from $750 to $950 starting January 1st. $200 I didn't have. My Social Security check was $1,612 a month. After rent, utilities, and groceries, I had maybe $200 left. That increase would put me $50 in the red every month. I'd been living in that 580 square foot apartment for 12 years. Beige walls, brown carpet that had seen better decades, a kitchen barely big enough for one person, but it was mine. The notice sat on my kitchen table for 3 weeks while I tried to figure out what to do. I couldn't ask Patrick for help. Zoe had made it clear that my financial problems were embarrassing to her. Last year, when I mentioned my car needed new brakes, she told Patrick, "Your father needs to learn to budget better." $700 for brakes on a 2009 Toyota Corolla with 180,000 miles wasn't poor budgeting, it was reality. The stress was killing me, literally. My doctor, Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell at the community clinic, ran tests after I started having chest pains in November. My blood pressure had spiked to 180 over 110. She prescribed a medication I couldn't afford. "Mr. O'Connor," she said gently, "stress can trigger heart attacks. You need to find ways to reduce the pressure in your life." Reduce the pressure? How do you tell a doctor that your daughter-in-law treats you like a shameful secret? That your son chooses silence over defending his father? That you're one rent increase away from homelessness? The medication cost $89 a month with insurance. I started cutting my pills in half to make them last longer. But there was something else eating at me. Something deeper than money or apartments or blood pressure. I was disappearing. When Emma and Luke looked at me, I saw pity in their eyes. 8 and 6 years old, and they already understood that Grandpa was someone to feel sorry for. Emma asked me once, "Grandpa, why don't you live in a big house like Mommy and Daddy?" Before I could answer, Zoe swept in. "Because Grandpa chose different priorities, sweetheart. Some people value hard work over material things." The way she said it made my choices sound like failures. Luke stopped hugging me as enthusiastically, started pulling away faster when I visited. They were learning to be ashamed of me. That realization hit harder than any financial stress. My grandchildren, Anna's grandchildren, were being taught that their grandfather's love wasn't worth much because his bank account wasn't impressive. But Zoe didn't know everything about my bank account. She didn't know about the blue memory box under my bed that I'd never opened. The one my mother made me promise to keep but never look inside unless I absolutely had to. "Promise me you'll live simply," my mother had whispered as she lay dying at Mercy General Hospital in 1992. "But remember who you are. If the time comes when you need to remember, everything is in the blue box." 32 years I'd honored that promise, lived simply, raised my son with dignity and hard work. But maybe the time to remember was coming faster than I thought. December 8th, 2024, Kroger on Market Street, 2:30 p.m. on a Sunday afternoon. I was using my SNAP benefits to buy groceries. $67.33 worth of food for the week. Ground beef marked down for quick sale, store-brand pasta, frozen vegetables. Nothing fancy, but it would get me through. I handed the cashier my EBT card, same as I'd done hundreds of times before. The young woman, maybe 19, smiled politely as she processed the payment. That's when I heard the voice behind me. How embarrassing. I turned around. Zoe Pierce O'Connor, my daughter-in-law, stood 3 people back in line, designer purse clutched in perfectly manicured hands, wearing what looked like a $400 coat. Our eyes met. "Hello, Vicky," I said quietly. "Just buying groceries, I see." The people between us stepped aside, sensing tension. The cashier slowed down her scanning, obviously listening. "Yes," I replied. "Just buying groceries." Zoe moved closer, her voice dropping to what she probably thought was a whisper. It wasn't. "With our tax dollars." The cashier's head snapped up. An older man behind Zoe shifted uncomfortably. I kept my voice steady. "I paid taxes for 50 years, Vicky. Every paycheck." Clearly not enough. The silence in that checkout lane was deafening. 5 people watching this woman humiliate a 67-year-old man for buying food. I finished my transaction without another word. picked up my 2 plastic bags of groceries and walked toward the exit. Zoe called after me, loud enough for half the store to hear. "Maybe you should try shopping somewhere more appropriate for your situation." I stopped, turned around. The old Eddie would have kept walking, would have swallowed the humiliation and pretended it didn't matter. But something was different this time. "Vicky," I said, my voice carrying clearly across the checkout area, "you don't know anything about my situation." I walked out of that store with my head up, but when I got to my car, my hands were shaking. I sat in that Kroger parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the steering wheel of my 2009 Toyota Corolla. The car Zoe had once described to Patrick as an embarrassment on wheels. That's when I made the first call. I dialed Patrick's number. "Dad, what's up?" "Your wife just humiliated me in public." Silence. "What happened?" I told him everything. The SNAP benefits, her comments about tax dollars, the suggestion that I shop somewhere more appropriate. More silence. Finally, "Dad, I'm sure she didn't mean anything by it." Didn't mean anything by it. "Patrick, she called my grocery shopping embarrassing, in front of strangers." "Look, Dad, Zoe's under a lot of stress with work and the holidays coming up. Maybe you could try shopping at different times, when it's less likely you'll run into people we know." People we know. My son had just asked me to hide my poverty so his wife wouldn't be embarrassed. "Are you suggesting I time my grocery shopping around your social calendar?" "That's not... Dad, let's just try to keep the peace, okay? For the kids' sake?" For the kids' sake. I hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about my mother's words. "Remember who you are." But I'd forgotten, hadn't I? Somewhere along the way, I'd let Zoe's version of me become the truth. The poor old man. The embarrassment. The burden. The blue memory box sat under my bed like it had for 32 years. Waiting. I got up at 3 a.m. and pulled it out. Dusty cardboard, secured with old tape that my mother had wrapped carefully in 1992. I held it in my hands for an hour. Then I put it back. Not yet, but soon. Because Zoe Pierce O'Connor had no idea who she was messing with. And neither did my son. The man they thought they knew was about to stop existing entirely. I need to tell you about my mother. Anna Margaret O'Connor died on March 15th, 1992, at Mercy General Hospital in Youngstown. Pancreatic cancer. 61 years old. I was 35 then, standing beside her hospital bed with 3-year-old Patrick sleeping in a chair. She'd been unconscious for 2 days when suddenly her eyes opened. "Eddie," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the machines. "I'm here, Ma." She gripped my hand with surprising strength. "Listen carefully. There's no time." I leaned closer. Under my bed. Blue memory box. Don't open it unless you absolutely must. Her breathing was labored, but her eyes were intense, more focused than they'd been in weeks. "Ma, what are you talking about?" "Your grandmother Helena. She fled Amsterdam in 1943, changed our name when she came to America." This was news to me. I'd grown up believing we were Irish immigrants from generations back. "What name?" "Van Buren? Helena Van Buren O'Connor." She coughed, specks of blood on her lips. "There are papers, legal documents, letters from people in Holland. I never opened them after 1983. "Why not?" Her grip tightened. "Because I chose to be American. Simple. Working class. I wanted you to grow up normal." The heart monitor was beeping faster. "But if something happens, if you need to remember who you really are, everything is in the blue box. Ma, you're not making sense." She looked directly into my eyes. "Promise me you'll live simply, Eddie, but remember who you are. The papers will explain everything." Those were her last coherent words. She died 6 hours later, with Patrick curled up on my lap and my hand still holding hers. Nurse Catherine Wells was there at the end. She's retired now, but I still have her phone number. She heard every word my mother said. After the funeral, I found the blue box exactly where she said it would be, under her bed in the small house on Oak Street where I'd grown up. The box was maybe 12 inches square, sealed with old packing tape. My mother had written, "For Stevie only if necessary," in her careful handwriting. I carried it to my apartment and put it under my bed. For 32 years it stayed there. Through Patrick's childhood, through high school graduation, college, his wedding, through every Christmas, every birthday, every family gathering where Zoe made me feel like I didn't belong. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the spot where I knew it was hidden, wondering what those papers said, what my grandmother had fled from, why my mother had chosen secrecy over truth. But I kept my promise, lived simply, worked hard, raised my son with dignity and American values. Only once had I been tempted to open it. 1999. Patrick needed money for college. His freshman year at Ohio State cost $14,000, and my savings fell short by $3,000. I lay awake for weeks staring at the ceiling, knowing that box might contain answers. But I found another way. Worked overtime for 6 months, took a second job delivering pizzas on weekends. My mother had said only if absolutely necessary. Apparently college tuition wasn't necessary enough. But something was changing now. Zoe's grocery store humiliation. Patrick's request that I hide my poverty. The rent increase that would force me from my home. Maybe the time was finally coming. December 24th, 2024, 6 p.m. Patrick and Zoe's house at 847 Maple Ridge Drive. 4-bedroom colonial they'd bought for $485,000 3 years ago. Zoe made sure everyone knew the price. I arrived with gifts for Emma and Luke. Nothing expensive. A $40 art kit for Emma. A $30 building set for Luke. Wrapped them myself in Christmas paper from the dollar store. The driveway was full of cars. BMW, Mercedes, Lexus. My 2009 Toyota Corolla looked like the janitor's car at a country club. Zoe answered the door wearing a red dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "Eddie," she said, not exactly warm. "You're here." "Merry Christmas, Vicky." She stepped aside reluctantly. "Everyone's in the living room." 15 people. Zoe's parents, Dr. Richard and Susan Pierce. Her brother Brett and his wife Amanda with their 2 kids. 3 couples from Patrick's bank. Zoe's friend Monica with her husband. All of them stopped talking when I walked in. "Look who's here," Zoe announced with fake enthusiasm. "Eddie's joining us for a little while." A little while. Emma and Luke ran to hug me. That felt good. Real. "Grandpa, we missed you." "I missed you too, sweetheart." I handed them their gifts. They tore into the wrapping with genuine excitement. "Art supplies," Emma squealed. "Thank you, Grandpa." Luke was already building something with his blocks. "How thoughtful," Zoe said in that tone, the one that made thoughtful sound like pathetic. Dr. Pierce walked over, martini in hand. "Eddie, right? You're in manufacturing?" "Retired," I said. "General Motors." "Ah." He nodded like that explained everything about my existence. The conversation moved on without me. Stock portfolios, vacation homes in the Hamptons, children's private schools. I sat on the edge of the group, watching my grandchildren play with their gifts, while adults discussed things I apparently couldn't contribute to. That's when Zoe started. "You know," she said to the room, "we've been having some interesting family discussions lately." Patrick looked up from his conversation, alarm in his eyes. "About boundaries," Zoe continued. "Setting healthy expectations." My stomach dropped. "Eddie," she turned to me directly, "we need to discuss your situation." The room went quiet. 15 people suddenly very interested in our family business. "What situation?" I asked. Zoe's smile could have cut glass. "Your financial situation, your living arrangements, your presentation." "Vicky," Patrick said quietly, "maybe this isn't the time." "When is the time, Patrick?" "When Emma starts asking her friends why Grandpa dresses like a homeless person." Gasps around the room. Dr. Pierce nearly dropped his martini. My granddaughter looked up from her art supplies. "Mommy, that's not nice." "Emma, go play in your room," Zoe said sharply. "I want to stay with Grandpa. Now." Emma gathered her art kit, tears in her eyes. Luke followed her, confused and scared. "This is what I'm talking about," Zoe said to the room like I wasn't there. "The children are embarrassed. We're all embarrassed." "Speak for yourself," I said quietly. "Am I wrong, Eddie? When's the last time you bought new clothes? When's the last time you drove a car made in this century? When's the last time you contributed anything meaningful to this family besides awkwardness?" The silence was deafening. Brett Pierce cleared his throat. "Maybe we should give them some privacy." "No," Zoe said. "Stay. You're all family friends. You should understand what we're dealing with." She turned back to me. "Eddie, the truth is, you're holding us back, socially, professionally. The partners at Patrick's bank have met you. They've formed opinions." Patrick's face was red. "Zoe, stop." "Stop what? Telling the truth? Your father shops with food stamps, Patrick. He lives in subsidized housing. He drives a car that belongs in a junkyard." Dr. Pierce set down his drink. "Zoe, that's enough." "Is it?" Because I've been enough for 5 years. I've smiled and pretended and made excuses, but I'm tired of being ashamed of my husband's family. That's when something inside me broke, not snapped, broke clean through. I stood up slowly. Every eye in that room was on me. Ashamed, I repeated. Yes, Zoe said defiantly. Ashamed of the poverty, of the begging, of the genetic dead weight you've passed on to our children. Genetic dead weight. The room was so quiet I could hear the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway. I looked at Patrick, my son, the boy I'd raised alone for 15 years, the man I'd worked double shifts to put through college. He was staring at his shoes. Patrick, I said, look at me. He raised his eyes. I saw shame there. Not shame for his wife's words, shame for me. This is your choice, I said, right here, right now. Dad, let's just... No, choose, your wife or your father. Zoe stepped forward. That's not fair. You can't make him choose between his family and his past. I looked around that room. At the expensive clothes, the expensive cars in the driveway, the expensive judgments on every face. You're right, Vicky. A man shouldn't have to choose between his family and his past. I walked to the front door. Tell Emma and Luke I love them. Where are you going? Patrick called after me. I stopped with my hand on the doorknob. To remember who I am. I drove home in silence, Zoe's words echoing in my head. Genetic dead weight. At 9:47 p.m. on Christmas Eve, I parked my embarrassing Toyota in the lot of my embarrassing apartment complex, climbed the stairs to my embarrassing 580-square-foot home, and I pulled out my mother's blue memory box. 32 years of promises. 32 years of living simply, of being the man Zoe thought she knew. I cut through the old tape with a kitchen knife. Inside, I found my real life. The top document was a letter dated June 15th, 1983. Letterhead. Decker and Associates, Legal Advisors, Amsterdam, Netherlands. Dear Mrs. O'Connor, it began. Following your mother Helena Van Buren O'Connor's explicit instructions, we are writing to inform you that the estate settlement awaiting your family's claim has grown substantially. I read that sentence 3 times before it sank in. Estate settlement. The letter continued. Your son Stevie is the sole heir to the Van Buren holdings, valued at approximately 8.2 million guilders as of this date. Per your mother's wishes, we have maintained the property and investments in trust, awaiting contact from the family. 8.2 million guilders in 1983. My hands were shaking as I pulled out more papers, bank statements from Netherlands Bank, showing account transfers and property management fees. All with my name, Stevie Van Buren O'Connor, beneficiary. Photographs fell out next. Black and white images of a massive stone manor house with gardens that stretched to the horizon. A family crest carved above the entrance, golden tulips on a blue field. A newer color photo showed the same house restored and magnificent. On the back, someone had written, Kasteel Van Buren, Lisse, Netherlands. 1600s construction, 50 rooms, 125 acres, maintained for American heir. American heir, more documents, property deeds, investment portfolios, a genealogy chart tracing the Van Buren family back to 1642. And at the bottom of the box, a sealed envelope marked, For Stevie, open only when ready. Inside, my mother's handwriting. My dearest son, if you're reading this, then the time has come for you to know the truth. Your great-grandmother Helena was not a simple immigrant. She was Helena Van Buren, daughter of one of Holland's oldest tulip merchant families. When the Nazis came, she fled with just the clothes on her back, and the promise that someday the family fortune would be safe for her descendants. She changed our name to O'Connor, learned English, and never looked back. But the lawyers in Amsterdam never forgot us. Every year they write. Every year they manage the estate. Every year the inheritance grows. I chose to ignore it because I wanted you to grow up American, working class, normal. I was afraid the money would change who you became. But you're a good man, Eddie. You've proven that. If the time comes when you need to remember who you really are, you have every legal right to claim what's yours. The current contact is James Decker. His grandfather managed our affairs when I was young. He speaks perfect English and has been waiting to hear from you. Choose carefully. Once you open that door, there's no going back. Love always, Mother. I stared at those papers until my eyes burned. Then I looked at the clock. 2:30 a.m. December 25th, 7:30 a.m. in Amsterdam. I found James Decker's phone number in the file, a Dutch international number that had been waiting for my call for 41 years. My finger hovered over the dial button. Once you open that door, there's no going back. I thought about Zoe's words, genetic deadweight, embarrassment, ashamed. I thought about Patrick's eyes, the shame I'd seen there. Not shame for his wife's cruelty, but shame for his father's poverty. I thought about Emma and Luke learning to pity their grandfather. I dialed. 3 rings. 4. Decker and Associates. This is James Decker speaking. English with a slight Dutch accent. Professional, but warm. Mr. Decker, this is Stevie O'Connor calling from Ohio. Silence. Then, Stevie Van Buren O'Connor? Yes. A sharp intake of breath. My God, we've been waiting for this call for decades. Are you well? Are you safe? Safe. I'm well, Mr. Decker. I found my mother's papers. Your mother was Anna Margaret O'Connor, née Van Buren? Yes. Mr. O'Connor, I need to ask you something important. Are you calling to inquire about your heritage, or are you calling to claim your inheritance? That was the question, wasn't it? I looked around my apartment. The peeling paint, the thrift store furniture, the life Zoe found so embarrassing. I'm calling to come home. Another pause. Home to Amsterdam? Yes. Mr. O'Connor, there are legal procedures, of course, documentation to verify, but I can tell you that your inheritance has grown considerably since the 1983 valuation. How considerably? As of December 1st, the estate value was approximately 26 million euros. 26 million euros. That includes Kasteel Van Buren, which has been fully restored and maintained. The original tulip farms now leased to premium growers, investment portfolios managed by our finest advisors. I was quiet for so long he thought we'd been disconnected. Mr. O'Connor, are you there? I'm here. Mr. Decker, how quickly can this happen? With DNA confirmation and document verification, 2 weeks, perhaps less if you can travel to Amsterdam immediately. What if I told you I wanted to leave tomorrow? Tomorrow? Christmas Day? Tomorrow. Then I would say, welcome home, Mr. Van Buren O'Connor, and I would ask why you waited so long. I looked out my apartment window at the parking lot where my embarrassing car sat under a flickering streetlight. Because I forgot who I was. But I remember now. December 25th, Christmas morning, 6:15 a.m. While my son's family opened presents in their 4-bedroom colonial, I was booking a flight to Amsterdam. KLM Flight 893 departing Cleveland Hopkins International at 6:55 p.m., arriving Amsterdam Schiphol at 11:20 a.m. the next day. One way, 1,250 euros. I used my Visa card. The one Zoe thought was maxed out at its $500 limit. She didn't know about the savings account I'd been building for 40 years. $68,430. Every tax refund, every overtime check, every birthday gift I didn't spend. Money I'd saved for emergencies. This was an emergency. At 7:30 a.m., I called my landlord. Mr. Patterson, Eddie O'Connor in Unit 412. I need to terminate my lease immediately. Eddie, it's Christmas morning. I know, I'm leaving the country, permanently. What, you can't just check my lease agreement, 30 days notice or forfeit of security deposit. I'm forfeiting the deposit. I'll be out by noon. Where are you going? Home. I hung up. Next call, First National Bank. Customer service, this is Jennifer. I need to close all my accounts and transfer the funds internationally. Sir, the bank is closed for Christmas. This is an emergency international transfer. I believe you have protocols. 20 minutes later, I was connected to a supervisor who could access the emergency systems. Mr. O'Connor, I'm showing a savings account with $68,430. You want to transfer all of it? All of it. To Nederlandse Bank Amsterdam, account number... I read from the papers James Decker had faxed to my neighbor's printer. Sir, this is highly unusual for Christmas morning. Ma'am, my entire life is about to become highly unusual. While the bank processed the transfer, I packed 2 suitcases, clothes, photos of Patrick as a child, Anna's wedding ring, the blue memory box. Everything else, the thrift store furniture, the discount dishes, the clearance decorations, I left for whoever came next. At 11 a.m., I called Patrick. Voicemail. Son, this is your father. By the time you hear this, I'll be on a plane to Amsterdam. There are things about our family you never knew, things your mother never told you. I've spent 40 years being the man you and Zoe thought I was, but that man never existed. My real name is Stevie Van Buren O'Connor. I'm the heir to a Dutch estate worth 26 million euros. Your great-great-grandmother was Dutch nobility who fled to America during World War II. Zoe wanted me to remember who I am. Well, I remembered. I love you, Patrick. I love Emma and Luke. But I'm done being ashamed of myself to make your wife comfortable. When you're ready to introduce your children to their real grandfather, you know where to find me. I hung up and turned off the phone. At 12:30 p.m., I walked out of Riverside Gardens Apartments for the last time. Left the keys on the kitchen counter. My neighbor Mrs. Chen from 414 was in the hallway. Eddie, you moving? Going home, Mrs. Chen. Home? But this is... No, I said gently. This was never home. It was just where I was hiding. At 2 p.m., I drove to Cleveland Hopkins International Airport. Parked my 2009 Toyota Corolla in the long-term lot and left the keys in the glove compartment. Taped a note to the steering wheel. Free car. Title and mailbox. Merry Christmas. Someone who needed transportation more than I did would find it eventually. At 4:30 p.m., I checked in for my flight. Traveling alone today, Mr. O'Connor? The KLM agent asked. For the first time in my life. She handed me my boarding pass. Have a wonderful trip. I'm going home. At 5:45 p.m., I sat in the departure gate, watching other passengers. Families returning from Christmas visits. Business travelers starting work trips. Young couples beginning European vacations. Nobody looked at me twice. Just another elderly man in discount clothes flying coach to Amsterdam. They had no idea they were sitting next to someone who owned a castle. My phone buzzed. Text message from Patrick. Dad, got your voicemail. This is crazy. Call me back. I turned the phone off and put it in my carry-on bag. At 6:55 p.m., I boarded flight 893. The flight attendant, a woman about Zoe's age, smiled as she checked my ticket. Welcome aboard, Mr. O'Connor. Traveling for business or pleasure? Coming home, I said. She directed me to seat 34E coach, middle seat between a college student playing video games and a businessman typing on his laptop. I sat down and opened the in-flight magazine to the route map. Cleveland to Amsterdam, 4,173 miles. 40 years of hiding to 40 years of truth. As the plane pulled away from the gate, I thought about Zoe's Christmas party. About her friends hearing how she'd finally gotten rid of the embarrassing father-in-law. About Patrick explaining to his children why Grandpa wasn't at Christmas dinner. About Emma and Luke asking when they'd see me again. At 7:15 p.m., Flight 893 lifted off. I pressed my face to the small window and watched Ohio disappear below me. The man Zoe had humiliated was gone forever. Eddie O'Connor, the poor old factory worker, had just ceased to exist. But Stevie Van Buren O'Connor was going home. December 20th, 3 weeks later. Zoe's office Christmas party at Morrison Pearson Associates. I know this because James Decker sent me the news clippings. Zoe was networking with potential clients when her assistant, Monica, rushed over with her phone. Mrs. O'Connor, you need to see this LinkedIn notification. Zoe was in the middle of explaining to a potential client why her firm was perfect for their investment needs when Monica interrupted. Not now, Monica. Ma'am, it's about your father-in-law. Zoe's smile faltered. My father-in-law is irrelevant too. He's trending on LinkedIn. The client, a woman named Dr. Sarah Williams, looked curious. Trending? Monica held up her phone. Stevie Van Buren O'Connor, Estate Director, Van Buren Holdings, Amsterdam. 15,000 new connections this week. Zoe's face went white. That's impossible. Ma'am, there's a news article. Amsterdam Business Journal. Lost American heir claims historic 26 million euro estate. Dr. Williams leaned in. 26 million euros. That's your husband's father? Zoe grabbed Monica's phone. The headline was impossible to miss. American factory worker reveals true identity as Dutch nobility heir. Below it, a photo that made Zoe's world collapse. There I was, standing in front of Kasteel Van Buren, wearing a perfectly tailored suit, shaking hands with Mayor Peter van der Meer of Lies, the Dutch flag and the Van Buren family crest flying behind us. The caption read, Stevie Van Buren O'Connor, 67, poses at his ancestral castle after claiming his inheritance. The Ohio native spent 40 years hiding his identity before returning to the Netherlands to manage his family's tulip empire. Dr. Williams read over Zoe's shoulder. Van Buren Holdings. I know that name. They're one of the largest agricultural exporters in Europe. Zoe's hands were shaking as she scrolled through the article. Mr. Van Buren O'Connor's great-great-grandmother fled Amsterdam during World War II, changing the family name to protect their identity. The estate, now valued at 26 million euros, includes the historic Kasteel Van Buren, original tulip farms dating to 1642, and investment portfolios managed by Decker and Associates since 1943. Monica pointed to another paragraph. When asked why he waited so long to claim his inheritance, Mr. Van Buren O'Connor replied, I promised my mother I would live simply until I absolutely needed to remember who I was. That time came when my family decided I was something to be ashamed of. The party had gone quiet around them. 23 people listening to every word. Dr. Williams looked at Zoe with new eyes. You're married to Patrick O'Connor, the loan officer at First National? Yes, Zoe whispered. So the man you've been calling poor owns a castle, finished Richard Brennan, Zoe's boss. Zoe's phone started buzzing. Text messages, WhatsApp notifications, Facebook alerts. All from the same Amsterdam Business Journal article being shared across social media. Richard Brennan was already pulling up the article on his own phone. Zoe, didn't you tell us your father-in-law was, and I quote, genetic deadweight? The room was dead silent. Zoe's phone rang. Patrick. I have to take this, she said, stepping away from the group. Patrick? Vicky, have you seen the news? I'm looking at it now. My father owns a castle, Vicky, a 26 million euro castle. That's impossible. I'm staring at photos of him meeting with Dutch government officials. There's a trust fund established for Emma and Luke, 500,000 euros each for their education. Zoe looked around the party. Everyone was staring at their phones now, reading the same article. Patrick, this is some kind of mistake. The mayor of Lissa issued a statement welcoming him home. The Dutch embassy in Washington confirmed his citizenship status. It's real, Vicky. Richard Brennan walked over. Zoe, I need to speak with you privately. Zoe followed him to his office, phone still pressed to her ear. Patrick, I have to go. Vicky, there's more. The article mentions specific quotes, things you said about him. Her stomach dropped. What quotes? According to sources close to the family, Mr. Van Buren O'Connor endured years of class-based humiliation, including being told he was genetic deadweight and an embarrassment to his son's social circle. Zoe's knees nearly buckled. Richard closed his office door behind them. Zoe, sit down. She sat. I just got a call from 3 different clients asking if you're the daughter-in-law mentioned in that article. Richard, I can explain. Can you? Because our firm's reputation is built on discretion and respect for our clients' families. We manage money for people who expect their advisors to demonstrate good judgment. This is a misunderstanding. Richard pulled up the article on his computer screen. Listen to this quote. Sources indicate that Mrs. O'Connor frequently mocked her father-in-law's poverty, excluding him from family events and publicly humiliating him for using government assistance. Zoe's face was burning. Richard, those sources are lying. Are they? Because Dr. Williams just told me she heard you complaining about your embarrassing father-in-law last month at the charity gala. Zoe's mouth opened and closed silently. Richard continued. And Monica mentioned that you've made several comments in the office about your husband's low-class family background. I never used those words. Zoe, we have clients who are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They trust us with their money because they trust our character. What does it say about your character that you spent years humiliating a man who turned out to be worth 26 million euros? Zoe's phone buzzed again. Another LinkedIn notification. Stevie Van Buren O'Connor has endorsed your skills in asset management. She stared at the screen. He'd endorsed her. From Amsterdam, as a professional courtesy. The man she'd spent 5 years calling genetic dead weight was professionally endorsing her on LinkedIn. Richard, I need to take some time off. I think that's a good idea. A lot of time off. Zoe walked back to the party. 23 people stopped talking when she appeared. Dr. Williams approached her with a business card. Zoe, when you speak to your father-in-law next, would you ask him if Van Buren Holdings needs American investment advisors? My firm would be very interested in representing someone of his caliber. Zoe took the card with numb fingers. The man she'd seated at the kids' table was now being courted by the same social circle that had witnessed his humiliation. January 15th, 2025. From the morning room of Castile Van Buren. I'm recording this sitting in a 400-year-old castle, looking out over tulip fields that my family has owned since before America was a nation. This morning I received 3 separate messages. The first was from Zoe. Eddie, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Patrick and I would love to visit Amsterdam with the children. We've always supported your decisions. Maybe we can start fresh. Start fresh. I deleted it without responding. The second message was from my son. Dad, I've been thinking about what happened at Christmas. I should have stood up for you. Zoe was wrong. I was wrong. I miss you. Can we talk? That one I kept. The third was from my granddaughter Emma, dictated to Patrick. Dear Grandpa, Daddy showed me pictures of your castle on his computer. It's beautiful. Can Luke and I come visit you? I want to paint pictures of your tulips. Love, Emma. I called Patrick immediately. Hello, Dad. Hello, son. Silence. Then, Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I know you are. I should have defended you. All those years I should have told Zoe to stop. You were protecting your marriage, I understand. No, Dad, I was protecting myself. I was embarrassed too. That hurt, but I appreciated his honesty. Patrick, I want to see you, all of you, but things need to change. Anything. What do you need? Respect. Not because of my money, because I'm your father. You have it. And I want to see my grandchildren, here in Amsterdam, without Zoe manipulating every conversation. Patrick was quiet for a long moment. Dad, about Zoe. What about her? She's been struggling since the news broke. Her firm put her on administrative leave. Our friends are asking questions. She's seeing a therapist. Good. Good? Patrick, your wife spent 5 years teaching my grandchildren to be ashamed of me. She needs therapy. She wants to apologize. I'm sure she does, but I'm not interested in her apologies. I'm interested in her actions. What does that mean? I looked out at the gardens where Dutch groundskeepers were preparing the spring plantings. It means your children are welcome here any time. You're welcome here. But Zoe needs to prove she understands what she did wrong. How does she do that? That's not my problem to solve, son. 3 days later, Patrick arrived at Amsterdam Schiphol Airport with Emma and Luke. No, Zoe. I hired a driver to pick them up. Mercedes S-Class. Emma's eyes went wide when she saw it. Grandpa, is this your car? One of them. Luke pressed his face to the window as we drove through Amsterdam. Grandpa, do you really live in a castle? I really do. When we pulled through the gates of Castile Van Buren, Patrick's face was a mixture of awe and disbelief. Dad, this is home. James Decker had prepared the estate beautifully, fresh flowers in every room. The children's bedrooms had been decorated with Dutch toys and books about tulips. Emma ran through the halls, her 8-year-old voice echoing off stone walls that had heard children's laughter for 4 centuries. Grandpa, there are paintings of people who look like you. Those are your ancestors, sweetheart. Luke found the library. 15,000 books in Dutch, English, French, and German. Can I read all of these? You have your whole life to try. That evening we ate dinner in the formal dining room. Patrick and I, Emma and Luke, and Mayor Vandermeer, who'd become a friend. Your grandfather, the mayor told Emma, is famous in our town. Everyone wants to meet the American who came home to save our heritage. What does that mean? Emma asked. I looked at my granddaughter, 8 years old, sitting in a room where her ancestors had dined for generations. It means sometimes people forget who they really are, but if they're lucky, they remember in time. Patrick reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Dad, I want the kids to spend summers here, if that's okay. That's more than okay. And I want to learn about our family, the real history. There's a lot to learn. Will you teach me? I looked at my son, the boy I'd raised alone, the man who'd chosen silence when he should have chosen courage. Yes, son, I'll teach you. Emma was drawing in her new art book, tulips and castles and what looked like a grandfather and 2 children holding hands. Grandpa? She said without looking up. Yes, sweetheart? Mommy said you were poor, but you're not poor. No, Emma, I'm not poor. So why did she say that? Patrick started to intervene, but I held up a hand. Sometimes, sweetheart, people judge what they can see instead of who someone really is. Your mommy saw old clothes and an old car and thought that made me less important. That's silly. Yes, it is. Luke looked up from his book about Dutch history. Grandpa, are you a king? I laughed. No, Luke, I'm just a grandfather who remembered he was worth respecting. That night, after the children were asleep in their castle bedrooms, Patrick and I sat in the study. Dad, there's something I need to know. What's that? Why didn't you ever tell me about any of this? I showed him my mother's letter, the one explaining her choice to live simply. Your grandmother wanted me to grow up American, working class, normal. She was afraid the money would change who I became. Do you think she was right? I thought about that for a long time. I think she was right to wait. I needed to know I could be a good man without money before I could be a good man with money. And Zoe, what about her? Do you think she can change? I looked at my son, still hoping for the impossible. I think people can change when they want to. The question is whether Zoe wants to change or just wants the consequences to stop. How do I know the difference? Time will tell. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you are watching from. And remember, dignity isn't negotiable. Respect isn't for sale. The person you underestimate might be exactly the person you need to learn from. Sometimes the best revenge is simply remembering who you've always been.